meet my bride. Let's go for a ride in my newfangled automobile. Just where we will go, nobody knows, but it's sure a great way to feel. Behind the wheel of the speed meter steel, it's my newfangled automobile.
Hello and welcome to Vintage Car History. I'm Wild Bill. Growing up in the 1970s, it was common to see businesses called body shops. Today, a body shop can mean all kinds of things. A fitness center, a hair salon, or perhaps a company that can do plastic surgery and such. But back then, a body shop was where you took your car after either a fender bender or to get the dents out. Yet there was a time when cars didn't even have bodies. So today we're going to look at the very early development of the variety of car bodies. When true cars came on the scene in the 1880s, most were based on either bicycles or light carriages. Neither of those vehicles actually have bodies. Bicycles were too small for anything more than fenders, if that. And light carriages were basically wooden frames with seats. And the first cars did not have the engines strong enough to add extras like body panels and to be able to pull them along the road. Car bodies became more common in the 1890s as the motive power, be it gas, steam, or electric, was becoming strong enough to carry the extra weight and/or passengers and maintain speed. Quite a few terms to describe a car's body came from this time period, though most have long since fallen out of general use. Let's look at them in turn. One of the earliest terms was voiturette, though voiturelle was also sometimes used interchangeably. It essentially means light car in French, and denotes a car with a small engine, typically seated only two persons, and the body was limited to seats, sometimes fenders, and panels to protect the important mechanicals. Windshield, doors, and roofs were not present on a voiturette-bodied car. Cars of this period with more power often could carry additional seating for 4 or more occupants, and how these seats were arranged were common terms used in the industry and still are for those folks who enjoy square dancing. One is dos-si-do. Another term from the French, it simply means that the seats are back to back so that the driver and passengers both face outward from the car and not all facing forward as is seen in modern cars. In Great Britain and sometimes in the States, the term dog cart was sometimes also used for this particular body style. V became a popular body style in the 1890s, which means that the people on board are facing each other. Typically, the driver was in the rear seat with perhaps a passenger or mechanic sitting next to him or her, while the other passengers sat in a row of seats in front of the driver, though the seat was lower in the body, so the driver had a chance to see over their heads and thus where they were all going. This body style, as well as the dos-si-do, did not survive long into the 20th century, as neither configuration had doors or roofs. Another 1890s body type was the landaulet. This depicts a car where there are 2 rows of seating, one for the driver and mechanic and the other for the passengers. Both face forward typically. However, in the landaulet, the passengers are enclosed in a body complete with a roof and sometimes even doors. Early automotive taxis were typically of this configuration. It's worth noting at this point that the terms we've seen thus far are derived from the carriage and coach building industry. Also noteworthy is that France was, in the 1890s, the dominant car building nation, which is why so many car body types have French names, many to this day. One of the most enduring was the coupe. Once cars began having roofs on them, the coupe defined a car with only room for 2 people, but they did have a roof over their head. Early coupes often did not have doors, but in the 20th century they were added, and the term stuck. Over in America, A new term was coined to describe a car designed for around-the-town use in the 1890s, which was just about all you could use a car for since they weren't, roads outside of urban areas. The runabout. Originally put into print by Alexander Winton, the runabout was a small car that was also versatile. The car body could, through various folding contraptions, carry either additional passengers, cargo, or both. Runabouts were not designed for unpaved roads, but for going about the city running errands, and they worked well. Also from America, the body style known as the high-wheeler came into vogue in the 1890s. These looked more like carriages and wagons than cars, but high-wheelers were important for anyone that needed a car capable of leaving town and heading across country. The first true production car in the U.S., the Duryea, was a high-wheeler, and they used the term to tout its ability to propel itself through the ruts of the pathetic roads available between cities and towns. Keep in mind, American roads of this time had the horse in mind. The horse is in the center of the road, while the wheels of the carriage or wagons are on the sides, creating the ruts. If a carriage bogs down in the mud, the horse can pull the vehicle out of the mud, as it has the traction to do so with its hooves pushing against the center turf. A car has no such advantage. And at this stage of American automotive history, it was easier and cheaper to just make the car with huge 40-inch or bigger wheels to increase their surface area and so make them less likely to bog down. Once we turn the page to the first decades of the 20th century, many new terms were applied to cars, some from the carriage industry, but others from the auto industry itself. One coming from the carriage industry was the limousine. These cars had the front for the driver, sometimes enclosed with doors and a roof, but not always or even typically. But the passengers had doors, a roof, usually convertible, and there was a partition between them, either of glass, wood, or metal, though glass was most common. Many of these early limousines had sound tubes, similar to what was found on ships of the time, to communicate with the driver, but could be capped off when the passengers wanted to keep their conversation private. Yet, one very important but mostly forgotten car body of the first decade of the 20th century was the torpedo. This is where the car is skinned with a hood, panels, and doors from front to back in a somewhat streamlined fashion, similar to the naval self-propelled torpedoes of the time. The first car to be built with such a body was made by Walter Baker in 1902, specifically for racing, yet the idea caught on. Enclosed the whole car, including the driver and passengers, seating, and even add windows, windshield, and even a convertible roof are all involved. Revolutionary. The torpedo body spawned a whole new generation of car bodies. The Roadster was amongst them. Typically meant for two people, but sometimes three, Roadsters were cars with speed in mind. The body was stripped of most conveniences and comforts to make what was often called at the time a cad's car. To pull up to your girlfriend's house in a Roadster made a statement. We're going to move fast, and quite a few shotgun weddings can be attributed to Roadsters. The touring body also gained prominence during this time. Touring cars were meant for, touring. Typically designed to comfortably carry 4 to 5 passengers, comforts were more in focus on touring car bodies. Plenty of cargo or trunk space, protection from the weather, and comfy seating for all involved. These were the family cars of the vintage era. Now, for those who couldn't afford a limousine, or for those that could but just like to drive themselves, the town car emerged as a popular body type in the first decade of the 20th century. These cars enclosed and protected the driver, not a common feature of limousines, and provided both driver and passengers with luxury features like lighting and heating with no partition between them. Town cars of the day were also fairly large, and many could carry up to 7 people. The last body type we'll be chatting about is the sedan. The term itself comes from Latin and not French and goes back some 2,000 years. It described initially a hand-carried litter that could hold one or more passengers, and the vehicle had both doors and a hard roof as opposed to a foldable leather one. The term saloon is interchangeable with sedan based on which side of the Atlantic you're on. But it came into use regarding cars around 1912 to describe a car with an engine in front, driver and passengers in the middle, and a trunk at the rear, all fully enclosed and protected from the weather with hard roof and windows. Today's cars, though called everything from SUVs to crossovers, all pretty much follow the pattern of evolution that led to the sedan. Enclose and protect the occupants from the road hazards and weather, provide cargo space that is also protected, and make the road trip as comfortable as possible. And when I get into my car today, I know that all three requirements will be met. But I also know that it took many decades for the automotive industry to get there with their varieties of car bodies. Thanks for watching Vintage Car History, and we'll see you next week. Peace.